Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to today's extra help lesson. You guys should see my screen in just 1 minute. Like usual, I'm going to give everybody like 5 minutes to join us. And then we're going to get started. Today is the essay lesson. So I had a few students, like 5 or 6 of you, send me some essays. I don't know if we're going to have time to get through all of them. I posted some of them and they're all going to be anonymous, so don't worry. So if we get through all the ones that I posted, then I'll happily upload more, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my screen now and hear me. And again, like usual, we're going to be communicating in the chat. So when I ask you guys questions, you can please answer in the chat. I'm just going to give people 2-3 more minutes to get settled, and then we're going to get started. So the goal of today's lesson for me is to go over the essay with you guys. I think that it would be really useful for us to go over the rubric so you guys know exactly what you're going to be graded on test day. So we're going to start with that. And then a brief review of the structure of the essay. I know I talked a little bit about it on Tuesday, but I want to give you guys some notes, some structured notes that you could go back to. And then I want the bulk of today's lesson to be about like imagery and vivid writing, because that's a big part of the rubric that you're going to be graded on. So I know you guys always hear show, don't tell, but I want to show you guys examples of exactly what that means and different tools that you guys can use, different figurative language that you guys can use. And I know we talked about figurative language briefly on Tuesday as well, but again, I want to make sort of a set of notes for you guys so you have something to go back to as well, with examples of similes and metaphors and all that good stuff, so you guys have it all with you. And then the last thing that I want to cover today is your sample essay. So I want to read at least 1 or 2 out loud and critique them in real time and show you guys how I would edit them. And hopefully that could help you guys learn how to improve on your essays, okay? And then like always, you guys can ask me questions and stop me in the chat. All right, so I'm going to give everybody 2 more minutes because I see people are still joining. And then we'll get started at 7:05, okay? Okay, let's give it 1 more minute and then I'll get started. Okay, so I started with including this piece here, just so you guys have sample essay topics that you guys can practice. So these are all good examples from prior years. I know from experience that a lot of times the Hunter exam likes to correlate things to New York City because they are a school located in New York City. So if I would definitely have one of those like prompts almost memorized. Does that make sense? Like a good structured essay. So if they send you guys with ask you to write an essay about New York City or how New York City shaped you, or a part of New York City that you're connected to, or anything to do with the city, I would have several examples of figurative language of how we describe the city, just several thoughts and ideas of how I would structure my essay. What are some positive things about New York City that I would write? So that's one essay that I would 100% be prepared for and write out fully. So when you go to the test, you're really, really prepared. And again, I can't guarantee that's going to be the essay, but just from my experience of tutoring past students, oftentimes New York City is a theme that comes up in the essay over and over again. So I just put this up here for you guys to have practice samples in case some students were looking for practice samples. Now, the next thing is this grading rubric, which is up to 10 points, right? That's the maximum that you can get on your essay. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do just want to run through it so you guys are aware of what's important in the essay. So one part of it is grammar, spelling, and punctuation. So this is basically how your essay, like the basics of the way that your essay is written, like nuts and bolts. So this has nothing to do with all of the good stuff that we're going to talk about, like organizing the essay or using vocabulary words or using a hook or using any of that kind of stuff. This just has to do with the basics of how you write. So these are, in my opinion, some of the easiest points to get. Because we practice this all the time. So grammar means that you have to make sure that all of your sentences are complete sentences. So oftentimes this is what students have difficulties with. You guys sometimes write run-on sentences, which they will definitely take points away from. So you have to make sure that you're writing in complete sentences. The other thing that they care about that I want to point out is varied sentence structure right here. So what that means to me is that every single sentence can't be the same. So you can't just write like short sentences every time. You have to spice it up, meaning that you can have a simple sentence with a simple subject predicate. That's fine. But then you want to have some complex sentences as well. So you can have simple sentences and you have to intersperse them with complex sentences. So an example of a complex sentence is if you use a semicolon, for example, or if you have a compound sentence. So if you have a sentence with a dependent clause, or if you have a sentence with two independent clauses connected with the proper punctuation. I can review all of that for you guys as well. So the goal is to be varied. So you don't want every single sentence to be simple. And I think that you would be overcomplicating the essay to make every single sentence complex as well. As long as you have a healthy balance, that's okay. And when we think about a paragraph, right, a paragraph should be 5 to 8 sentences. So out of those, you can have like 3 be simple sentences, 2 be complex, for example, and that would be completely fine, healthy balance. So I don't want you guys to feel really stressed and make all of them complex sentences because one, that's unnatural. Normally when we speak and when we write, not every single thought is a complex sentence. And second of all, it's going to take you guys way longer, and it's completely normal and healthy for any piece of writing to have simple sentences. But at the same time, they can't all be simple. So you have to have varied sentence structure. So that's one point. The other thing is you have to be consistent with your tenses. So you can't flip-flop tenses. So if you start writing in past tense, or if you start writing in present day tense, you have to maintain that tense unless situationally it makes sense. Like unless you're talking about a past event as a supporting detail, or you're telling a past story to support your point, then you can transition just in that part to past tense. Does that make sense? But you can't in one sentence or in one paragraph consistently flip-flop because that's confusing. And the other thing that has to be consistent is plurality. So your subject verb have to agree. So all of that is like a very basic grammar review. The thing with spelling, the only thing that I could say is you control the words that you put into your essay. So if you guys practice a lot right now and you build up your vocabulary, you can look up how to spell all of those complex words that you want to use to make your essay sound good. And just obviously know how to spell them and memorize them. On test day, if you're really unsure about a certain word and you can't think of a synonym, I would leave it. Having one spelling mistake is not going to like kill your grade, but if it's a consistent problem, they will take points away. And then punctuation just goes hand in hand with grammar. So on that note, let's just make a new page and let me give you guys a very basic grammar review, just so you know exactly what's expected of you. So one of the things that I mentioned was subject-verb agreement. So this means that your subject and your verb have to agree. So for example, I can say, my dog barks, right? Or another sentence can be, many dogs bark. So both of these are very simple sentences that I'm using just to show you guys a point, right? So who can tell me the subject in either of the sentence and the verb in either of those sentences? It's obvious. What's my subject and what's my verb? Yeah, clear. So the subject is obviously dog. And the verb is obviously bark or barks. So when I tell you guys the subject and verb have to agree, this is what I mean. How come in this case I choose barks with an S, and in this case I choose bark with no S? So this is about subject verb agreement. In this case, my subject is singular. Right? So I'm only talking about one singular dog. And the rule is when your subject is singular, we conjugate the verb by adding an S. So the verb is conjugated with an S. And for most native English speakers, this comes naturally because this is the way we speak. So I can say, my mom talks on the phone. This becomes a little bit different with a little bit more complex verbs that aren't just conjugated with an S. An example of that is versus are. So I can say, she is coming, or they are coming to the movies. So this is example, she is one person. That's why we would use is, which is singular, and are is for plural. And then obviously we can do the same thing in past tense. So was or were. So these are just some basics. So it would be wrong to say my dog bark. So that would be something that they would obviously take points away from. Okay, so that's one big concept in grammar. The other concept in grammar is punctuation with complex sentences. Oops, sorry guys. Okay, so who knows how to combine two independent clauses? So let's say I like the diversity of New York City is important to me. It is evident within the people, the food, and the overall ambiance. Okay, so here are two simple sentences that I'm giving you guys. Both of them are completely grammatically correct. So the diversity of New York City, in this case, diversity is my subject and diversity is singular. And that's why I'm using is, right? So singular, singular. So everything makes sense. And here, same thing. It is singular and is singular. So these are both completely legal. This is completely okay. So one way that you can combine sentences is you don't combine them, right? You still use punctuation. I still use a period and I still use a capital letter. I know that might sound like common sense, but we still use that. They will definitely dock points for you guys if you remove the period or the capital letter. And if you wrote this without a period and without a capital letter, that would be a run-on sentence. Okay. So we have the basics covered. Now let's say I want to combine them. Is it okay for me to put a comma here and just make this lowercase? Is that allowed or not allowed? No, good. That's not allowed. That would be a run-on sentence. Excellent. So we cannot do that. We cannot just put a comma there. Okay, so now we have two options. So one option is use a semicolon. And in that case, I completely don't have to add any words. I just make everything lowercase and I just put a semicolon in the middle. So that would be something like the diversity of New York City is important to me, semicolon, it is evident, and you keep going until the end, dot, dot, dot. So that's one way where it's completely legal. Okay, next, somebody is saying use a coordinate conjunction, coordinating conjunction plus comma. So that's the second way that we can do it. So what's the mnemonic for you guys to remember your coordinating conjunctions? Do you guys know the mnemonic? You're allowed to write NYC. Yes, the mnemonic is fanboys. Okay, what does fanboy stand for? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Excellent. So you're allowed to use any of these words and use that to make your sentence complex. So for example, we can say the diversity of New York City is important to me, comma, and it is evident in blah, blah, blah. Now, with coordinating conjunctions, one extra thing for you guys to remember is that these have meanings, right? So you want to make sure that you're using the right word for the meaning that you're trying to convey. So it wouldn't make sense if I put a but in there because I'm not saying two contrasting ideas. So make sure that you're picking a word that makes sense with what you're trying to get across. And the last way is, yes, I was just going to say this. You could use because. Because is one of those subordinating conjunctions. So the third way is to use subordinating conjunctions. And these are words like although, and these are words like because. And if you open with one of these, then that's a dependent clause, and then you have to use a comma. But if the dependent clause comes at the end of the sentence, like in this case, you don't need to add a comma. So for example, it would be completely okay to say the diversity of New York City is important to me because and then finish the sentence that way. In this case, meaning-wise, it doesn't meaning-wise make sense that it's important to you because it is evident in the food and whatever else, but you can finish that clause in a different way where it would make sense. Is that clear? So these are all the ways that you guys are allowed to grammatically correctly combine sentences, okay? None of these are run-ons. The only way that this would be a run-on is if you just used a comma or if you just use no punctuation at all. That would make it a comma. So these are basics of punctuation and grammar. That should be enough to make you guys score here. Okay, the next thing has to do with advanced vocabulary. So this is using, like higher order words. Don't say New York City is good, New York City is fun. You guys can use more advanced vocabulary words. And the other part is transition words. So again, sometimes students can go overboard with transitions. So every single sentence does not need to open with a transition, but you should have at least 5 to 6 transition words within the essay. And that's a natural course of how we write. And transition words can include anything that signifies contrast, like however, signifies passage of time, all those kinds of things. And I'll give you guys a list of transition words at the end of this lesson as well that you guys can incorporate. Okay, so the next part of the essay has to do, so 3, 6, 9. So the next part of the essay has to do with how you structure your essay and what you include inside each structure. So What's important here is making sure that you have a basic structure of an essay. You want to open your introduction with a hook. You want to have a thesis, and then you want your structure of your essay to make sense. So every body paragraph should have a point, should have a topic, and that topic should then go back and support your thesis. And then you want to restate your thesis in the conclusion. And then this last part is the fact that you're answering the prompt and you're answering the question. So you write an essay that's on topic. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly review this so you guys know what's important. Somebody said, can you go to the previous slide? I can leave this up for a second. And somebody's asking, will they give us the rubric the day of the test? I'm honestly not sure if they're going to give you the rubric. I know this rubric has also been like edited by the staff at Queller Prep. So I'm not sure if they will give you an official rubric the day of the test. Okay, so the next thing that I want to start to talk about is structuring your essay. So this is what I started talking to you guys about the other day during our reading comprehension lesson, and this is what I want to talk about more now and give you guys clear notes on now. So let's review the essay structure. Okay, so every single one of your essays should begin with an introduction. So we're going to open with an intro. So what most of you guys hear is that we want to begin with a hook. So now, in my experience, I've heard a lot of different people saying what's okay, what's not okay with a hook. Some things are cliche, some things are not cliche. In my personal experience, it doesn't really matter as long as you use a hook. I know some people will say, don't use a quote or don't use a question, that's overdone, that's boring. As long as you are making a visible effort to the person that's reading your essay, that you're trying to get people's attention, you will get the point for starting with a hook. So what I would do in my head is I would have a few sample hooks like planned that will work for multiple essays. So generic or broad things that could work for more than one essay topic. And for me personally, sometimes it's really hard to start writing an essay. And then once I start writing, I'm good, like I can keep going. So that's why I find that it's really important to come prepared with a few sample hooks. That way, one of them is bound to work when you read the essay topic that they're giving you, and you're able to begin right away. Because this essay, you're pressed for time. So I don't want you guys to sit there and be really stressed over this part of figuring out what the hook is for a prolonged period of time. So my advice to you guys would be come up with either a generic question that could be applied, like a rhetorical question, or you can use a literary device. So any of the ones that we talked about, and we can take notes on them later. So remember yesterday we talked about similes and metaphors, and we talked about hyperbole. So you can open up with an exaggeration, or you can open up with some onomatopoeia, I always misspell this word. You can open up with a quote. So this is something that I won't necessarily recommend. This wouldn't be my first choice, just because you have to like come in with a quote memorized, because obviously you don't have access to look anything up. So that's like one more thing that you would have to come in prepared for. And then how do you know that the quote is going to work for the scenario they give you? And then the last one is kind of similar to using figurative language or literary devices. You can just use descriptive or vivid language. And we're going to practice a lot with this later today, because I think this is really important to make your essay stand out. But by this, I mean use imagery, use a lot of adjectives, play on your 5 senses. Okay, and then the goal is, so you're going to open with your hook. You're going to have some filler sentences. And then the important thing is that your introduction paragraph has to end with the thesis statement. So this is really, really important. This is the main idea of your essay. This is what you're going to be writing about, and this is what they're going to be looking for in your first paragraph. So in your first paragraph, you have to make them check off the box that you guys have a clear thesis statement. Okay, so let me give you guys a thesis statement, an example. So let's say growing up in New York City shaped my core values because I was exposed to, let's say, a great public school education and diversity. Okay, so then if this is my thesis, I'm basically giving you guys a roadmap of what I'm going to write about. So what this essay is about is how New York City shaped my core values. So that's what this essay is about. And what one body paragraph is going to be is all about public school. And what the second paragraph is going to be is about diversity. So just by reading this one sentence, you guys know exactly what the rest of my essay is going to look like. And that's what's important for you guys to do with your thesis statements. Does that make sense? It's like you're writing a roadmap for what's to come in your essay. So the hardest part of writing your essay should be this thesis. So now the second part, and yes, ideally you would have 3 body paragraphs, but here I'm just giving an example with 2, just for the process to go faster. But ideally you would say 3 things and then you would have 3 body paragraphs, correct? Okay. So then the second thing is going to be, how do we structure our body paragraphs? So each body paragraph should open with a topic sentence, and that's kind of like a mini thesis. So one body paragraph is going to be all about diversity. So example can be something like diversity is palpable all around the city. Via food, people, and architecture. And being exposed to all of this early on shaped my blah, 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 shaped my beliefs, shaped my core values, shaped whatever it is that you guys want to say. But this is an example of a good topic sentence. And again, what this topic sentence does is it creates a roadmap for the paragraph. So I know now in the paragraph, I can discuss food, people, and architecture. Now, this might be a little bit too much for one paragraph. So with something so broad like diversity, we could break it down into 2 paragraphs, and we can write all about the diversity of food in one and all about the diversity of people and architecture in a second. And in that way, we can still have 3 body paragraphs. So you're going to open with something like this, and then you're going to start to give supporting details and examples to prove this. So how is New York City diverse with food? So you want to talk about your senses. So you can talk about how you smelled food. You can talk about how you saw various types of people. You can talk about how you heard different music in the subways, or you heard many different languages being spoken. So notice that what I'm doing is I'm playing on the senses, right? And all of this is going to be very vivid, descriptive adjectives and language. This is also where you want to include your figurative language. So you can start talking about your similes and your metaphors. This is also when you want to include some of your transition words. You could also give narrative examples here, so like personal stories to support whatever you're saying, any examples, any details. So that's what you're going to be filling your body paragraphs with. And then with the next body paragraph, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to open with another topic sentence and do this all over again. And then finally, the last thing that you're going to do is you're going to have a conclusion. Now, the conclusion paragraph should be the easiest to write. All you're going to do is you're going to restate your thesis, and then you're going to talk about why is this important. So restate your thesis, and then make it significant. So why should the reader care? What makes this important? So this is going to add just a little bit extra to your essay. So in a question like this, in an essay topic like this, you just want to talk about who cares about diversity, who cares about New York City, who cares about core values, and you just want to make 1 or 2 sentence statements of why all of that is important or significant. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the basic essay structure that I want you guys to emulate. Now, anybody have any questions about the structure before I go on to how we write vividly? Sure. So I can leave this up for a few minutes because somebody's copying down the notes. And then we're gonna write about, we're gonna do some notes on vivid writing. So I want to do vivid writing, sensory details, transition words, figurative language, and then we'll hopefully have time for 1 essay. Okay, and let me know when you guys are done so I can flip. Okay, so the next piece of this note of these notes is about vivid writing. So this is all about showing instead of telling. This is what you'll hear a lot of people tell you. They'll say show, don't tell. But I want to show you guys how exactly we do that with examples, because I think that's the best way to learn. And ultimately, my goal for these lessons is to fill your guys' toolbox. So going into any exam, we always have a toolbox in our brain. So I want your toolbox to be filled with all these different examples that you guys can pull on test day. And if you take these notes and you listen to these courses and then you practice, so you try to write an essay and then you force yourself to pull these out on test day, it's going to be really easy for you to pull from that toolbox because it's a toolbox that you use often. It's always open in your brain. So that way it becomes easier. And that's really how you do well on any exam. You just have to keep practicing until it becomes almost like second nature to you guys. So one thing that we can do in terms of vivid writing and on this test is create a sense of setting. So setting, like I showed you guys on Tuesday, means time and place. Where are you? So show us, don't tell us. Show, don't tell where the story or where whatever you're describing is taking place. Okay, so I can give you guys a really dry example. I can say it was autumn. The weather was getting cold. So this is not bad, but this is very simple. And this is me directly telling my audience where I am and what's happening. I'm telling them that the season is autumn. I'm telling them it's cold. But instead, what we can do is we can show them. So as a quick side note, notice how I use the semicolon. So this is an example of our complex sentences, grammatically correct. Okay, so how can we spice up this sentence? What can I say instead of it was autumn? So potentially I can make up a metaphor. And instead of telling that it's cold, I can show that it's cold based on actions. So let's see how I can spice this up. I can say something like the dry kaleidoscope made up shades of orange, red, and green as it crunched underneath my feet. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, and I pulled my coat collar up over them. So something like this. So this is what I mean. This is a super complex sentence, right? It's really long. If every one of your sentence was like this and I was reading your essay, honestly, I would lose meaning, right? So we don't want to be too wordy. So it's okay to have one really long, complex sentence like this in a paragraph or two, but it's not okay if every single sentence is like this because we're going to start losing meaning. Now let's see if this is a run-on. So I have the dry kaleidoscope. So first, what is the dry kaleidoscope? What figure, this is what kind of figurative language? Good, right, this is a metaphor. So I'm making a comparison of the leaves to the kaleidoscope, but I'm not using like or as. Okay, made up shades of orange, red, and green. So here I'm just using vivid imagery, right? I'm using adjectives, I'm using imagery. And you guys can be even better than me, and we can edit this further. Instead of orange, red, and green, I can say orange, crimson, and green, just to up the vocabulary also, right? There's levels to this, so you can keep going, but you don't have to overdo it. You just have to do a little bit of this in your essay to get that extra point. As it crunched underneath my feet. Okay, so now I'm adding like texture, right? So crunch, so I'm thinking about the leaves crunching underneath my feet. Then I have a semicolon. So everything up to here is a complete thought. That's okay. I have to check everything after here if this is a complete thought. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, comma, and. So I have a comma and a coordinating conjunction. I pulled my coat collar up over them. So I think grammatically this checks out. What I'm doing in the second half of the sentence is I'm describing action. So instead of just saying that it's cold, I'm describing action to show the readers that it's cold by saying that the hairs on my neck stood up and I'm pulling my coat cover over them. That's an action that somebody would do when they're cold. So in that way, we're showing the reader that we're cold instead of just telling them that we're cold. So the key is you describe action, use figurative language, and then be as descriptive as possible. So details / description. And the key is appeal to the senses. So describe what something looks like, what something smells like, what something feels like, what something tastes like, all of those. Okay, does anybody have any questions on this example? Okay, so then let's do examples for using our 5 senses. So how do we apply sensory details? And again, when I say sensory details, I want you guys to think about sight, so what something looks like, touch, what something feels like, sound, taste, and smell. So those are our 5 senses. So for each one of those, let's go through an example of a vague sentence, and then I want you guys to try to brainstorm how we can better that sentence. So let's start with sight. So when we think about sight, I want you guys to describe appearance. So that could be color, that could be shape. And let's start with the simple sentence. The sky was blue. How do I spice this up? How can I rewrite the sentence using sensory details? So I want you guys to brainstorm and give me some examples in the chat. So I want you guys to have the same meaning. I want you to describe the sky, what the sky looked like specifically, because we're doing sight. So somebody said, the sky was a beautiful shade of blue. As I stood in astonishment viewing it, the sky was a spiral of cyan. Looking around me, I was encased in a dome of ocean blue and clouds similar to cotton candy. Bright sky etched itself into my eyes, bringing up a memory of the screen of death on my laptop, except with clouds. The sky clear and brilliant blue. Picturesque azure blue. Okay, good. So a lot of you guys are getting the idea. So one thing that I like that everybody's doing is using adjectives. So that's good. I also like how some people like include themselves into it. So encased in a dome of blue clouds, that's good. The sky shined a dim blue light, and I looked around at the different shades that surrounded me. Okay, good. So what some of you guys are not doing is using like a metaphor or a simile. So I know it's a lot easier for you guys to just use adjectives, but I want you guys to try to incorporate some figurative language also. The other thing that's good that you guys are doing is using creativity. So comparing it to like cotton candy or comparing it to your screen, all of that is good. It also shows your personal touch on the essay. Which the test makers like, because they also want to get to know your personality. That's something that your essay can set you apart from, right? Because everybody, like the test makers can't really gauge you any other way except your essay. That's your moment to be personal, because the multiple choice is very dry. Okay, so let me give you guys an example of something that I would potentially write. So we can say something like the sky was bright blue, like the color that stains your teeth after enjoying a blueberry slushie. So the goal for this is there's no right or wrong way, but I just want you guys to get really comfortable with using figurative language. So first adjective, right? Bright blue, and then like the color, meaning that this is a simile. And then this is my way of being creative. I'm comparing it to a blueberry slushie. Okay, let's try another example. Let's do touch. So with this, you want to think about what something feels like. You want to think about texture. So a really bland example, a basic example is the rock, was rough. So now I want you guys to brainstorm and think of a way to jazz up that sentence. And again, you guys are all good at using adjectives. So I want you to try more about using a figurative device, like a literary device rather. Okay, good. The rock was as rough as sandpaper. Good. The craggy rock felt like a hard bristle beneath my hand. The rock felt like a hard piece of crumpled paper. As I placed my hand on the rock, I could feel its sharp, rough edges. Okay, good. Good. So I see more of you using metaphor and simile. Good. So my idea when I wrote this sentence was also to compare it to sandpaper. So the way that I spiced this up is I wrote the coarse rock was rough against my palm. It felt as if it was coated with sandpaper. Good, excellent. So I see all of your guys' examples. And again, just to point out exactly what we're doing here, coarse is an adjective. And then it felt as if, this is a simile. I'm making a comparison using like or as. Okay, good. So it seems like you guys are getting the idea of this. So the template overall for vivid writing is we want to use adjectives. I also want to encourage you guys to use adverbs. So it doesn't only have to be describing nouns. You could also describe verbs. So adjectives and adverbs, figurative language, showing rather than telling, and then incorporating examples. So let's do the last three as well, just so you guys have an example of each of those. And then we can move on to transition words. So let's do sound, taste, and smell. And I'll give you guys a simple sentence for each of these. And I want you guys to work on giving me a vivid example. Okay, so I'm making these really vague and really broad to give you guys as much room and creativity as possible to see what you guys can come up with. So take at least 5 minutes and try to come up with 3 spiced up sentences to fix these vague examples. Good, I really like that one. So somebody said the crisp music licked at my ears. Excellent. So I think some students are uncomfortable with metaphors. So I like that you incorporated that. Somebody said the music flooded my ears, sending energy through my body. Good. Soft hush of music sounded majestic to my ears. The music felt like an amazing ocean flowing through my ears. Good, good simile. Good, so somebody moved on to the sour with the taste. I puckered my lips as the sour patch in my mouth attacked my tongue. Yeah, that's really good. I like that you're using action rather than saying that something is sour, you're showing it in the action. Somebody else had a similar idea. The putrid candy made me wince at how sour the white sugar on top was. Good, as sweet as sugared waffles. I love that. The sour candy burst on my tongue, hissing like a scared cat. Excellent. Okay, good, good. So you guys all are sort of getting the gist of it. So I'm going to put up some examples just for our notes, but I'm happy to see that you guys all understand what we mean. So now the goal is just incorporating what you're learning here into your essay writing. And again, I want to emphasize that you don't need to overdo this. So not every single sentence needs to be like this. But this is definitely a good way to make your body paragraphs and your details stand out from everybody else's. Okay, so this can be something like from the very first note. Okay, excellent. So all of your examples were good. I just put 3 up here on the board for you guys to have in your notes. And again, I just want to point out some of the things that I did. So melodic is an adjective. So the more adjectives we use, the better. And then here, the whole audience couldn't help but sway to the irresistible beat. So here I'm showing by describing action. So instead of saying the music was good, the music sounded good, I'm showing the action that implies that obviously the music was good. And then what I'm doing here, my taste buds recoiled or the putrid odor attacked. So here I'm using personification. So that's something that none of you guys, or some of you guys actually did in your examples as well. So don't forget that we have other literary devices. Not everything only has to be a simile or a metaphor. We could also use personification. And then again, here I'm describing action to show rather than tell. So nowhere in this sentence that I say the candy was sour, but based on the reaction to the candy that I drew my lips up in a pucker, it's implying that the candy was sour. And then you can argue that this is a little bit of alliteration, but you could make it more obvious if that's something that you're going for. So you could say disgusting dirty diapers, for example, if you want to incorporate that literary device in there as well. And then in the last one, I also wanted to just use simple sentences to show you guys that you don't always have to do complex sentences. So the last example is just 2 simple sentences. Okay, do you guys have any questions about vivid writing or any of these examples that we went through, how to incorporate the different literary devices or figurative language into your writing? Okay, so one more thing that I want to do just for you guys to have in your set of notes is go over different transition words and what kind of transition words you could use to signify different ideas. And then we can review some of the essays that you guys sent me, okay? Okay, so let's review transition words. Okay, so first, why would we use transition words? So not just because it's on the rubric, but the point of using transition words is that they connect and relate ideas. Not just ideas, but obviously sentences and paragraphs. So they kind of weave along your writing. In doing so, they assist in the logical flow of ideas. And then finally, they also signal relationships. Okay, so here are some different indications of transition words. So we can use transition words to add ideas. We can also use transition words to demonstrate order or sequence. To show examples. To show results. To contrast something or to compare. To emphasize. And then finally to summarize or to conclude. Okay, so how can I signify addition of ideas? The most basic word that we always use is and. You could also use also, you could say further, you could say in addition. You can say further or furthermore. You could just say to, you could say moreover. You can say to add on. So all of those are good ways to, if you're trying to say a second example that supports your main idea, you could just incorporate one of these transition words. Now for order or sequence, the most basic ones is something like first, second, third, and this could keep going. You could also use next, you could use last, you could use finally. You could also use words like before and after, which are transition words, but they're also just prepositions. You could also say finally, or I already said that. We could say in the end. You could also use sequentially. So all of these are to signify order or sequence. Now, for examples, the most basic one that everybody uses is for example. The other thing is you don't want to be repetitive. You don't want to say, for example, every single time. So for varied language, you could also use for instance. You could also use to illustrate. You could say such as, and then list examples. You could also say to be specific and list examples. Now to show results or consequence, you can say as a result, obviously. You could also say consequently. You can say hence, so, accordingly, therefore, thus. You can say because of this or for this reason. So all of these are different ways to show results. Now, contrast is important because you definitely want to use a contrast word if you have a contrasting idea to prepare your reader. Otherwise, it's too coarse if you just bring up a completely opposite term. But if you use one of these transition words, it softens it. So it makes it more logical. So you're adapting to the flow of your essay. So what you could use if you're trying to introduce a different idea is but, You can use in contrast. You can use conversely. You can use however. On the other hand. On the contrary. You can use actually. You can say despite or whilst, yet. So all of these are contrast words. And then to emphasize, you can say most importantly. So that's definitely going to show you emphasis. You can say again. You can say first and foremost. You can say above all to signify importance. And then just repeating also makes it emphasized. So you can say as aforementioned and then restate something. So that also tells your author that tells your reader that you're emphasizing something because you're repeating it. And then finally, to summarize or to conclude, you can use the basic ones like in conclusion and summary. Again, you'll hear people tell you that these are overused, but if you really can't think of any other transition word and your time is running out, you could use that. You could also just use overall. You can say in short. You can say as you can see, and I'm running out of space. Okay, so I know that a lot of you guys already know these transition words, but I just wanted to provide you a list with a direct sort of use for them. So again, if you look over this before your test, or if you start using these words and incorporating them more in your essays, you know exactly, okay, I need to use an example, what words, and you have a bunch of words in the front of your head. So that way it becomes more automatic and you don't need to spend as much time doing that. Okay, does anybody have any questions for me before I go and I look at some of the attached essays that you guys have sent? Somebody said, what is the organization for the visual essay prompt? It's similar to this. So if I'm not mistaken, you guys can correct me. The visual essay prompt is like they give you a picture, right? And you're asked to respond to it. And then people are still sending essays. Again, I don't know if we'll get to all of them. So we have about half an hour left. I can put my email in the chat again if you guys want to send more essays. I've uploaded, I think, 4 already. So let's try to get through those first and see if we have time. And if we have time, I'll just go based on like whoever sent them, like the order you guys sent them in. That's what I'll post them in. Okay. So this is another example of the 5 senses. This is all attached to Thanksgiving and different ways that you guys can describe the 5 senses. So I can include this in the notes and you guys can look at this after because it's very similar to what we did. And then here's a little checklist that I can also include in the notes for you guys to go back to. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to read this essay together. And you guys can also tell me what you think as I read the first paragraph. We can discuss it and then we can think about how we could make it better. Okay, so it says, when I already have practically all I want, I turn to the one thing that never ceases to amaze and immerse me. Reading. Facing a book, flipping through its pages, it just takes me to a different imaginary world. I want a history book for my birthday. I have read almost all of the fiction books in my school, so I want to try out something new. I really want a book on World War II, as it was a major historical event that irreparably changed people's daily lifestyle. World War II was a major case of hate towards Jews, and it even included tyrannical dictator Hitler, who was kind of insane. Okay, so it seems like this was our first paragraph. So what do you guys think about this first paragraph? Let's start with positive feedback. So what did this author do well? Yeah, good. So somebody said descriptive. The other thing is I can see that they attempted like a hook, right? So we have some attempt for a hook. Now, some basic things that I'll say is when you start an essay, you want to indent, right? So every single paragraph you have to indent. So that's something that they will take off points for as well. So you want to indent. So indent means that if this is my paper, when I start writing a paragraph, the first paragraph, just leave in a little bit extra space on the first line. And then on the next lines, you can write like this as well. And then when you go to the next paragraph, you're going to indent again and then keep going like that. So the reason you indent is visually for the reader, when they can see that you have clear paragraphs, right? When you indent, you're kind of saying, okay, this is my new paragraph. So that's how we write in order to communicate to us that we are starting a new paragraph. Okay, so that's one thing that I would say. Then I would say when I already have practically all I want, I turn to the one thing that never ceases to amaze and immerse me, reading. Okay, so I think this is like an okay hook. We can definitely do better, but this is passable. It's all right. But what I will say is reading is absolutely not a full sentence, right? So we can't put a period and then have one word be a full sentence. So this is a really good indication for using a colon. So you can put a colon and then reading, and then that could be the end of the paragraph. And then this would be short. I mean, not short, sorry, lowercase r. So I didn't talk to you guys about a colon yet. So yes, colons and dashes are usually interchangeable. This is part of the grammar part of the essay as well. So you guys can absolutely use that for sentence variability as well. And this is how you would use it when you're sort of leading up to an example. I will say that we can come up with a better hook. So try to use a better hook, incorporating maybe some figurative language. No, you can't use a comma in this case. This is the indication when you only have like one word that you're leading up to, that's the indication to use a colon or a dash. Okay. If we keep reading, we say facing a book, flipping through its pages. So what I'll say is this facing a book, flipping through its pages. So this is something called parallel structure, right? So this is okay because this is an ing word and this is an ing word. So that's okay. But then it just takes me to a different imaginary world. So between different and imaginary, these are both adjectives, the comma belongs there. Between imaginary and world, there should be no comma there. So a little bit of a grammar problem. And then a little bit of like what is it, right? So this is a question of questionable pronoun. And you definitely have to be a little bit more specific in this essay, more specific and more formal. So you can't be as, this is too broad. So in this, I'm guessing is the answer to the prompt is probably, what do you want for your birthday? So I want a history book for my birthday. So we have answered the prompt. And then I see sort of a formation of a thesis, right? So I want a history book for my birthday because I have read the fictional books in my school. So I want to try out something new. And because this is about a important historical, some certain historical events are important to me. Does that make sense? So this going into World War II, I think is a little bit too specific. So this kind of specificity and example belongs more in your body paragraph. So what I would do is we need to work on formulating a better thesis here. So the thesis is the answer to the prompt. So definitely part of your thesis would be, so my guess is the prompt here was, what do you want for your birthday? Or talk about something that you would want for your birthday. So it's good here he answers the prompt, or he or she answers the prompt, right? I want a history book for my birthday. But this is a very basic answer to the prompt. We need to formulate this into a thesis. So can somebody try to write a thesis based on what this person was talking about? So if I wanted to write a thesis based on these ideas that are thrown here, I would say something like, I want a history book for my birthday because it is a genre I'm unfamiliar with. And because I have a lot of curiosity about historical events. So something like this. So what you can see that I'm doing here is, instead of explaining that he or she wants to try out something new, this could be your topic sentence, right? So you could expand on this in a body paragraph. So I want a history book because it's a new genre for me. I want to explore something new. And because I already read all the other genres in school, and because I'm unfamiliar with this topic, I'm excited to try something new. It's part of my personality. It's part of my core values, blah, 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 blah. Write a whole paragraph on that. And then a second idea that this author has here is about historical events and how those are major and important. And instead of mentioning specific historical events, so these specificities, again, belong in the topic paragraph, in your body paragraphs. Here, you just want to say, I'm curious about historical events. And then in your body paragraph, you can expand that. You want to learn a lot about historical events. One thing that you're really interested in is World War II, because that was a major world global event that changed the way blah, 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 and all this stuff. Does that make sense? So what you guys see is that a lot of students, the ideas that you guys have are good, but they're in the wrong places in the essay. So what I want to really teach you guys is how to restructure. So this is how I would restructure this thesis, and then you would incorporate some of these ideas into the body paragraphs then. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so let's keep reading. So again, here, this is the next paragraph, so I would indent. And this has to be his topic sentence. So this says, reading for me takes me to a whole different imaginary world. Okay, so one thing that I'll say here is we don't need to say for me, right? So it's obvious that this is a personal essay, so you don't want to be repetitive. So reading takes me to a whole different imaginary world. This is an okay topic sentence, right? So it has to do with with your thesis, because it explains why you care about reading, why you want a book for your birthday. So it's an okay topic sentence. So now let's see how they expanded on it. It makes me forget about everything, sometimes even my surroundings, when a book is truly interesting. So one problem with the way that this is written is it's too conversational. So you have to be more formal. This is too conversational. You have to be more formal. So we don't write the way that we speak. So it makes me forget about everything, sometimes even my surroundings, when a book is truly interesting. And the structure is a little bit off. So you have to say and instead of saying that it makes you forget about your surroundings, this is a good example where you can show instead of tell. So we can say something like, when I'm reading a truly interesting book, I'm captured by the details and the plot, and I feel like I'm in a trance or something like that. Does that make sense? Or I have an outer body experience, or I forget where I am. Or you can show instead of tell. So you can describe an action that makes you feel that way. So you can say something like, you read all day and you notice that it's dark outside, to show the structure of time, the passage of time, and how you're so enthralled in the book that you don't realize that the whole day went by, something like that. Or you can use figurative language and compare it to something. Reading stimulates my brain, with me subconsciously imagining how the events in the book would look like. It feels like when I read a book, I am there present and immersed, only for and only to the book. I sometimes slow down when a book gets emotional. I sometimes speed up when a book is too boring and predictable. I focus so much on the book in my hands when I read that I can sometimes just lose myself inside of a book. Okay, so this whole time is very repetitive, right? So you keep telling us that you like reading, that you lose yourself in the book, but you have to use different examples to get that across. like some of the figurative language that we talked about today. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that all of your sentences, you need to vary the sentence structure more. So you can see that not only are most of these sentences just simple sentences, but there's too much I. So I. Almost every sentence starts with an I, and it's very obvious when you're an outsider reading it. So you want to avoid doing something like that as well. Okay, and then while fiction is really exciting, something new for a change would be much appreciated. Okay, so this is again relevant to your thesis, so that's good. And I see that you're trying to follow the structure. You start each thing with a topic sentence. That's good as well. Another thing that I'm not noticing is transition words. So while might be the first one. And I would be a little bit more broad here, and I would mention the history, right? Because that's what you're kind of arguing for, that you want a history book. So in your topic sentence, it would be important to mention that. And then notice here you start with while again. So again, we have a little bit of a problem with repetitiveness. While I love fiction, I'm also into the subject of history, with the wars and major battles especially catching my eye. I decided that a history book would be a nice birthday present to have. History book is a nonfiction book, meaning that it would be something exciting and different from the usual fiction books I read. Fiction books are really exciting to read, but after reading so many of them for so long, more and more creativity in books is required to impress somebody. The same cannot be said. Okay, so again, I see the problem is just repetitiveness, right? So you don't want to just talk about how you love fiction books so much and how you've read so much fiction books. You want to convince the author and provide an argument for what you're looking for in a history novel. Does that make sense? Okay, and then here I see that you're talking about World War II, but again, ideally it's important that you make this relevant to the essay. So you can't just be changing topics and talking about how World War II is like so interesting and a really important event. You have to bring this back to why is this relevant to you wanting a history book? Does that make sense? So this whole thing is just about World War II, but you have to make this relevant to the prompt. Does that make sense? So bring it back to, and it can't, I wouldn't write it only about World War II. I would write something about, like, I'm curious about historical events in general, and an example of that could be World War II and how that shaped everything. Does that make sense? So it's really important for you guys to just think of your essay as going from broad to narrow. And if you randomly find yourself going broad again or off topic, you know that you're kind of reaching. Does that make sense? So it's better to have 2 solid body paragraphs than have 3, but one is completely kind of out there and not relevant to what you're writing about. And then finally, this should be your conclusion. So how did Nazi Germany hold out for so long? That's just one of the many questions relating to the topic of history. Enjoy reading with all my heart, and now feel as if I'm ready to move from fiction genre to nonfiction genre. I'm very excited to read about history because of the 2 main reasons. I want to get a history book for my birthday, and because it will be new and different. Okay, so I can see your attempt to restate your thesis, right? So overall, the very bare bones of this essay are not bad, but we need to work more on structure and logical flow. So that's the 2 main things that I would say are lacking from this essay: structure, logical flow, and then you want to increase your vocabulary and your varied sentences and all that, because it's kind of like choppy and too conversational. Okay, so I don't want to like spend too much time just on one essay. So let's read the second one and critique this one together as well. And then hopefully this was helpful, and I'll let you guys go. Okay. So as I strolled down to the basketball courts in my cool silky shorts, it felt as if everyone was glaring at me. I put on a confident smile and bounced the basketball to the rhythm of my heart. My black jeans fit comfortably around my waist while looking stylish. The sparkling white shorts are my favorite clothing because they let me be myself and boost my confidence. I relive my memories as my grandma gave me a smooth piece of clothing. My grandmother made it for me on my 8th birthday, and from that day forward, always reminded me of my family, encouraging me to be myself and increase my confidence. Okay, so I'm guessing that the prompt is something about like your favorite item or an item that's important to you or something like that. So the thesis part here is good. So my grandma gave me the piece of clothing and it's important to you because it reminds you of your family and it encourages you to be yourself and it increases your confidence. So we can see here a good thesis sentence. Now, it seems to me that the hook, you were trying to hook in your audience using like a narrative, like using like a past story. Dance the basketball. I like To the Rhythm of My Heart. I like the descriptive language here, cool silky shorts. But then I'm kind of confused because you're saying that you're wearing cool silky shorts, but then we're talking about black jeans. Yeah, so I see the outlines are good, but just in between, I'm kind of losing your meaning here because I'm not sure why this black jeans part is relevant. And if you're opening with this hook of using this narrative story, I would finish the story. Like I would like, you know, tie the bow all pretty. So make that connection that because of the silky shorts, you were able to score the goal or something, and then go into your thesis statement. Does that make sense? So I think there's like a little bit of a disconnect here. So the hook is good, but there's a disconnect between the hook and the thesis. So these filler sentences in this essay, the filler disconnects, and I kind of lost meaning. But other than that, the pieces are good. So the hook is okay, the thesis is okay, and I see some aspects of figurative language, which is all good. But just the middle is disconnected. So that's what I would work on in the introduction. Now, next, ever since I was a young boy, I was a child who was very scrupulous at picking my everyday outfit. Every day before I received my shirts, everything I wore did not meet my needs. In just a couple of days, it would be in the back of my closet, never worn again. This is because clothing did not express who I was. Okay, so this is the beginning of a good paragraph, right? But you don't develop the ideas enough. So this is too short. So this is too short of a body paragraph. You have to keep going, right? You have to tell me that these shorts are important to you because they allow you to express who you are and show me how. Does that make sense? So this whole paragraph should be about how the shorts taught you about self-expression, let's say using style, self-expression using style. So that's what this paragraph could be about. And then I would expand on that. So I would say the shorts taught me confidence, taught me how to express myself using clothes, give examples of how now you express yourself using clothing, put in figurative language in there, all of that. Even though I might fear doing activities I've never done them, shorts show me to be brave. After all, it reminds me of how life is built upon failures, because it took many attempts for my grandmother to pair. Okay, so this paragraph could be how it's important to you because your grandma gave it to you. So this whole piece part of this beginning part should be still part of this idea. And then this paragraph should now open with a new topic sentence about how these shorts are important to you because they're made by your grandma. And then this could be an example to support that it reminds you of the lesson that your grandma would always teach you about growing up and standing up on top of failure, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can relate that to your basketball game. And then finally, in your conclusion, you're doing a good thing that I talk about, which is significance, right? So you're saying, why is this important? And this is important because you connected the shorts to bravery. So that's good. But I want you to be more clear on repeating your thesis here. So I want you to repeat your thesis about why the shorts are important to you. So talk about how they help with your self-expression and confidence. And they're important to you because your grandma gave them to you. So you need to do a better job at restating the thesis. And again, there's only 2 body paragraphs here, so we would prefer 3, but again, it's better to have 2 perfect ones than have a third one that's completely out of place. Okay, so I don't think that we have time to go through more essays, but I hope that this was helpful for you guys. I'm happy to stay for the next 5-10 minutes and answer any more questions. This was kind of the last piece of our Hunter 3-day series during President's Week. But you guys still have plenty of time before your exam. So I want to encourage you guys as much as possible to force yourself to write practice essays. It's the best way to improve. And then grade yourself the same way that I'm doing here. So write it, and then the next day or in 2 days, read it again objectively and try to go through the rubric and try to constructively criticize yourself and see what you can do better, and see where you can improve. I think the most important thing for you guys to take away is structure. If you get the structure down, then it's easy to go ahead and build upon that structure and fluff up your essay more and include more adjectives and more vivid writing. But the most important thing for you guys to get down is to figure out the structure of a good essay. And this is something that's going to stay with you way beyond the Hunter exam. This is the basic structure of any essay that you guys are going to write in high school and beyond. Okay. So that's basically it for me. I wish you guys the best of luck. I hope that I see some of you again in future classes or through private lessons. And if you guys have any questions, I'm sticking around. And if not, you guys are free to go, and have a good night and enjoy the rest of your break if you guys are on break. Thanks, guys. Good night. And I'm still staying logged on in case anybody has any questions. So somebody asked, are the visual essays usually 3 body paragraphs? So the visual essay, the visual prompt is honestly something new the test has added. It used to not be there in like prior years. To my knowledge, the structure should be similar. So at least 2 good body paragraphs, ideally 3. But I don't have as much experience with the visual prompts. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, so all of these were recorded. In terms of accessing the recordings, I would reach out to Mrs. Frances Queller. You could also email me and I could see if I could just send the recording, but I'm not sure if I'll have access. But definitely ask Miss Queller. I know in the past she has posted my webinars on YouTube. So likely maybe they'll do that again. But I would reach out to her. Or if you want, you could also reach out, just send me an email at the end of this. And then I can see if I can figure out how to send it on my end. Sure. So I can send you a whole file of the notes. Again, just email me. And I'll send you a file, and that one paper that you want out of the notes will be part of the total file that I just exported from today. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna end the meeting now. Take care. It was a pleasure hosting these 3 webinars for you guys, and good luck. Sure, I can post my email address one more time. You got it? Because I'm gonna end the meeting. I don't want you to get locked out. Okay, great. Take care. Good night.